friends. Welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws podcast with East Forest. I'm Ced Forrest. How you doing? Thanks for joining us again this week. Tonight, when this is coming out, Tuesday the 14th of September, we are playing a ceremony. I should say I am playing a ceremony concert in Denver, Colorado. So if you're hearing this and you want to come, check it out, eastforest.org/tour. And if you're in Salt Lake City on Thursday the 16th of September, you can come see us there, which will be the next stop. And the following week will be in Austin on the 21st, Tuesday. And that event is with Jon Hopkins. So I'm over the moon about like 2 concerts in one in Austin on the 21st. And then we're moving on to the Treefort Music Fest after that. So I just wanted to quickly announce about those upcoming, well, really imminent tour dates, because it's been such a long time coming. And these concerts were planned kind of before the whole Delta thing really took off. And, you know, we've rescheduled Salt Lake, for instance, 3 times. I think this is the 4th attempt. So we're moving ahead with it. And we do have various protocols and measures. But I just appreciate your support. And for those who are willing or I should say able to come out, because I know not everybody is. But it's been a long journey. And I'm looking forward to, as we all are in the music industry, figuring out how to make this work going forward. And we're just taking it a step at a time. We also just announced we'll be at Esalen Institute. That is something else that got rescheduled from pre-pandemic. So that's November 12th through 15th, and that's filling up pretty quickly. So if you're looking for a retreat with Marissa Rada-Wepner and myself, check that out. Also at eastforest.org. This week, I have a conversation with Tiffany Shlain. Tiffany is really fascinating. We have so many points of connection, but she's an Emmy-nominated filmmaker, the founder of the Webby Awards, a speaker, and an author. And her book that we're going to talk about is called 24/6, Giving Up Screens one day a week to get more time, creativity, and connection. This is a subject that I think about a lot, and we touch on here on the podcast about technology and time, creativity, and just living well with more authenticity in the world. So 24/6, this book, it's an interesting subject, and I felt a natural connection with Tiffany, and we got right into it after a few little technical snafus. We kind of switched gears from desktop to mobile, but we made this work, and I really think you're going to enjoy this conversation and getting into her world. Thank you as well to everyone who reviews the podcast and shares the podcast, and especially those who join our council on Patreon. That is a way to support this podcast and, more importantly, to dive deeper together. We do a monthly Zoom council together, and I also use the platform as a place to share unreleased tracks and music and ideas and kind of things I can think of, the occasional live stream. So, check it out. It's patreon.com/eastforest, or you can see more about that at eastforest.org. And eastforest.org, of course, is where you can check out our shop and merch, the perfume oils, the Ram Dass, Spores vinyl, all that stuff, possible vinyl. It's all back in stock. We had a bit of a inventory thing going on there, apparently, but it's back. It's back. So if you need gifts or looking for more ways to support, that's a great way to support the 10 Laws podcast, which we put out there in the spirit of the gift. So in these wild times, I think our attention is more valuable than ever, and just sort of that process we feel with our attention inside our heads and our minds. So I think this conversation is quite relevant, and you're going to enjoy it very much. So on that note, let's welcome our new friend, Tiffany Shlain. This is an interesting introduction into our conversation because, I was looking into your world, and it has a lot to do with technology and what it means to be a human. And my work has a lot to do with, in essence, using forms of technology, whether they're new or old, as a way of understanding our humanity more. But it's always about balance, really. And we're walking through a time where we're quasi-cyborgs moving into an unknown future. So it's kind of strange and fitting that we're struggling with the most basic forms of technology that also are allowing us to connect. And everything feels like a double-edged sword.
That is a great way to put it. That is great. I mean, I had an experience yesterday where I'm Jewish. It was the Jewish New Year. And I went to one of my favorite, thinkers on all this. This is in New York. So I woke up really early to listen to him online and watch his Zoom, which was great. But I just wasn't as completely present. And then I went to an in-person situation, and it was a full embodied experience. And I was so grateful that I was able to tune in to hear what he had to say. But I just know myself that the surround sound of humanity, whether that's with music or any kind of event, just like nothing can hold a candle to it. And it's like this double-edged sword of being grateful that we're alive in a pandemic when we have all these technologies that can connect us, but to really understand how they are a sliver of the experience. They just are.
Why is it, do you think, that we're so hungry for connection, yet we find ways to connect digitally that maybe are making us feel less connected?
Well, I would answer that question differently if we weren't in a pandemic. I mean, there's a lot of connecting which is out of necessity during the pandemic, whether for work or just to see people that you love that are far away or that, don't feel safe to be in the physical room with other people. So there's kind of that element. But I think at our core, humans want to be seen, valued, and loved. That's like the core of what it means to be human, which is at the core of why we want to connect.
Right.
And we've basically created all of these technologies that do that in weird ways, whether it's notifications or posting something and getting likes. And it gives this kind of echo of that feeling. But as we know, being in the same room with someone with real eye contact there's nothing replaces that kind of presence and attention. And in fact, I think that's one of the reasons why Zoom is so tricky, especially group Zooms for work situations, is that it's like you're kind of trying to look up close at all these people, which isn't really quite normal. And you can't really quite make eye contact. Like I'm trying to look at you, but I'm also trying to make sure that I'm looking at the camera. And so it gives this kind of adjacent sense of eye contact all the time. And that's what's happening all day long. So like a lot of times in Zooms, I will turn my camera off.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at you because it feels like a more natural conversation. But if I'm being recorded and as a filmmaker, I want to make sure that the lighting's still good, I will keep it on, which, I try to not pay attention to. So, but I think there's so many interesting questions of humanity and connection that we're really seeing under a magnifying glass right now. I mean, I went to a rock concert with 35,000 people and actually quite safe environment. It was an outdoor concert 2 weeks ago. And I mean, it was incredible.
Who was
to
it?
Feel the energy of that many people. It was Green Day. And my brother, long story, but at the last minute he called. I've actually never seen them in concert before. And what I've learned is between YouTube, Green Day, and I just said YouTube, ironically. U2, Green Day, and Coldplay are like the most successful touring bands. And, this guy's been playing since he was in 7th grade, and he has mastered the performance. He's a masterful performer and gave like 200,000% for 2.5 hours in front of 35,000 people. And it was electrifying. I mean, you're a musician. I mean, just that reverberation of energy, just nothing replaces that. And I do a lot of speaking in theaters. And the last theater performance I gave was February 15th, 2020 in New York City, packed theater, just like it was at MoMA in New York, beautiful space and just like so much energy. Yeah, February 15th, I had been working on this one-woman show that I was calling Spoken Cinema. And the show was called Dear Human. And it was all about technology and humanity. And it was like packed theater, just like so exhilarating. And my last line in the show was, what is it going to take for us to turn down our screens and pay attention to what matters? And that was, February 15th, 2020. And we were planning on taking that show on tour, and it really explored kind of the history of technology with humanity and my own journey with it. and some bigger questions. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. We didn't go on tour. And I think a lot of people started looking at the relationship with technology in a whole new way because we had to use it for absolutely everything. But I haven't been in a theater since then speaking. And that's, I spent a lot of my time doing that before COVID. So, I've been giving a lot of talks on Zoom and really playing with the Zoom format to make that, bring it to life and exciting, but just nothing replaces being in a theater, just that. The energy bouncing off of people back to you and from you
Sure.
and for you. I mean, just nothing replaces it.
Well, I was looking at that Dear Human project, and it's right up my alley of interest. And you had this line in there about tech amplifies and amputates our humanity. And
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, how your thoughts on that might have changed now that we've been moving through the pandemic, but also, like, if you're feeling hopeful about this merging the way how we're going to walk our walk with technology and our humanity at the same time, because that's inevitable that we're in that path and those things will be tied together.
Well, I do find that when I am with people, well, actually, even at this rock concert, there was a point where Billie Joe Armstrong was like, "Put your phones down. Please put your phones down. We have been locked in our homes for a year and a half, staring at our phones, and we're finally together. Put them down." And it was almost like he gave permission and everyone put their phones down. And it was incredible. And I was at another concert, outdoor, much smaller. And she also told everyone to put their phones down, and they did. And, I just wrote a book about my family's decade-long journey turning our phones off for a day. We call them our tech Shabbats, and we've done it now almost 12 years. But I wrote the book when we had done it for 10 years. And so many people that read it felt like I was giving them permission, like, you can do that? And I'm like, yeah, not only can you do it, it's a 3,000-year-old idea, like yoga and meditation, called Shabbat, a day of rest. In our modern society, turning the world off for a day is the most replenitive, it's like restorative, replenishing, recharging, resetting thing I've ever done in my life. And so I think that there is this, I feel like, awakening. A lot of awakenings happened from the pandemic. I mean, I think the social justice awakening, the Me Too awakening. I think right now we're seeing a lot of workers saying, I don't want to go into the office 5 days a week and be available to my bosses every weekend. And finally, because the technology made it possible, it doesn't mean it's a good thing. So I think a lot of people are pushing back on that. So it's been a really hard year and a half, but I do think I'm always looking for where's the growth? When things are uncomfortable, growth happens. And what is the growth that's happened? And those three areas are pretty huge. This sense of awakening. So I think that on the one hand, we're kind of more addicted than ever because we have to use it for so many things. But I know when people turn them off, it's such a huge sense of relief. If you're told to do it, or if maybe you're inspired to do it, if you read about it in my book, or if for some technical reason I had a friend who, like, her phone died and she was on a road trip and she couldn't get it fixed for 5 days. She's like, I freaked out at first and then it felt amazing. So whatever the impetus is to actually turn your friggin' screens off, or I think at least a day every week, it's going to be the best feeling that you've had in a long time. And I think people have forgotten because it's been so long since they've done it.
So do you think that, like, your prescription for moving forward as a people, that's the most simplified path that can actually work, is just taking one day off?
I do. To me, I love any idea that's withstood the test of time. With something like yoga and meditation and this concept of the Sabbath. I mean, it's the fourth commandment. I'm not a religious person. I'd say I'm very spiritual, but I'm not religious. But it is the fourth commandment. And if you look at the 10 commandments as these are 10 principles on how to live well. Do not commit murder, honor your mother, thy father, take a complete day of rest. Actually, take a complete day of rest every week is above honor thy mother and thy father and do not commit murder. It's more important in the list is to really take a break. Our brain, our souls, and our bodies were not designed to be on all the time. And even if you think of, like, athletes, Olympic athletes, and interval training, they give a break. We're not giving ourselves. We wake up, we look at that phone, we go to last thing before we go to bed, look at that phone. And that's not healthy. It's like you need to understand what you're thinking on your own. You need to know what that inner thinking is. You need to know what you're really feeling inside and listen to that inner voice. You need stillness. You need reflection. And, I talk about in my book, 24/6, not only, this complete day of rest every week that we've done, but all these kind of mini things I do throughout the week. And one of them is the phone gets charged downstairs, or else I can't read properly. I can't go to bed properly. It's too alluring, and it's designed that way. And when I wake up, I write in my journal, and I don't look at it for like 15, 20 minutes. So there's so much research to back up why this is a good thing. And so my book has like a lot of neuroscience and, just research on why, because I think people have forgotten. They're like, oh, this is just the way I live now. But probably the reason why you're feeling burnt out or tired or exhausted, that could be part of the reason.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that like the best minds in the world are working on how to garner our attention. I mean, that's just the most powerful thing that we have to offer as a product is like how much, and that's where there's a lot of value to that. And I mean, do you think though that like we'll look back on these times a few decades from now, like we did cigarettes, like we'll think like, man, we were looking at digital tools and phones, and we kind of thought they're fairly benign, and we kind of let kids and people, everyone's just like, yeah, you just kind of are on it for 4 or 5 hours a day, and it's with you all the time. Do you think like our thinking might change in the future?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're talking to someone who was a smoker, and I thought it was very cool, and I was rebelling against my doctor father, but I loved the way it looked. I thought it looked so cool. It was glamorized and, all the movies. And much in the same way, like, I think you see people like that are important. We're looking at their phone, scrolling and texting, like they have better things.
They're doing things. Yeah.
Right. It's very glamorized. And, I remember it was a combination of things. It was like public health campaigns that like showed the horrible lungs and people dying, and then they started being taken out of movies. I actually think that, it not being cool anymore, I think that was almost bigger. And I think that in terms of the addictive quality, I think a lot of, we started turning off screens like almost 12 years ago when not many people were talking about the addictive quality. Now in the last like 4 years, the movie Social Dilemma, and you see digital T-docs, it's just like more in the public sphere. And I think a lot more parents are really understanding how much their kids are being manipulated. And listen, anything you do, I make a lot of films on neuroscience, anything you do will strengthen that part of the brain. So if every time you're bored or want to be entertained or numbed, you pick up that phone, that's what you're training your brain to do. Like, that's what I need when I feel that way, instead of sitting with yourself and think, wait, what am I really wanting? I would love to create something that whenever you pick up your phone, first of all, it asks you like 5 things that bring you joy, whether it's playing music, going for a walk, yoga, writing in your journal, everyone's got a different thing that brings them joy, but you list 5. Every time you pick up the phone, it would say, wait, don't you really want to be doing one of these things? I mean, the truth is sometimes you just want to zone out. I love social media. I'm on Instagram and Twitter a lot for my films and whatever. But sometimes you want to zone out. But the problem is it's designed so you never know when that sometimes is over. And I will find myself where I'm like, oh my God, 2 hours just passed. I feel horrible. And I like turn it off and put it downstairs. And I think, because my bedroom's upstairs, I think that there's no, when you read a book, there's a beginning and a middle and an end, but there's no ending to your stream. It's designed that way. There's no end. You don't have
infinite.
No signals that it's ended. So it just goes on forever. And the problem is everything it's designed to do is waking up our animal instincts. And I have this whole chapter about that. Like, your prefrontal cortex in your brain is like, tries to plan and do bigger picture thinking and filter and schedule and focus your attention on the things you really want to do. And your amygdala and your animal instincts is like desire. I want more. I want to eat more of that. I want to watch another thing. I want to be entertained. I want to be scared. I want to be. And that the phone is designed to just keep you glued to it all the time. So it takes courage, I think, to go, you know what? I value my brain. I value my attention. I value what I'm focusing my attention on more, because it could just take all of your attention. I remember when my daughter, who just started college, but she about 7 months ago took TikTok off her phone. She's like, I can't control myself. It's not healthy. I don't like how much time I'm on it. She took it off. I was so impressed with her. I was like,
that's really impressive. Yeah.
I was like, but that's my daughter, because she has self-control. I was like, that's amazing that you just took it off. And I think that's why I put it downstairs. I mean, everybody charges, we put them downstairs because, to me, out of sight, out of mind. I don't want to, and even on our tech Shabbats, we put them away. And so it's not an option anymore. So, and there's all this research that, like, if you don't want to eat too many cookies, don't keep cookies in your pantry. Like, it's the same idea.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've been thinking a lot about, I'm working on this talk that I'm giving tomorrow online, of course. But so there's a Jewish idea, which is really cool. I'm super into Jewish ideas, not the religion part, but the ideas like Shabbat. And
well, there's that book, that famous book, I think it's called Sabbath.
Yeah, by Heschel.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's another idea in Judaism was beautiful called Shemitah. And every 7 days, you're supposed to let the land not be farmed. And in Israel, like, the land is not farmed for, like, they rotate. So every 7 years, and that's where the term sabbatical, like, my husband's a professor, and the whole concept that every 7 years a professor stops professing to his students and goes and does something totally different to refresh his brain. And the problem is that we really, and that's the whole concept of a 7th day of rest, replenish, recharge, let your brain lie fallow for a day. So I'm working on this talk about, think of your brain, body, and soul as soil, and you are the gardener. You are the gardener of your brain, body, and soul. And you do not want to over-farm, over-cultivate, overuse all of those things, because they will deplete.
Absolutely. I've used the garden idea and metaphor as well. And I think another interesting aspect of this is ritual.
Yes.
You think about you start to ingrain the ritual of the phone in various forms, from boredom and whatnot in your life, in the morning and evening, whatever. But maybe it's kind of a harbinger of a lack of ritual in our life in other forms, because we're so secular in a sense that, and I mean that truly, like, just devoid of spirituality. It's like we're filling holes in a way.
Oh, that's such a great point. I mean, it's funny, the word secular. By accident, I was trying to say I was a secular Jew, and it came out as I was a sexual Jew, which I'm also. But very funny, because I've always felt like the word secular sounds kind of surgical. Like, there's no warmth to it, sadly. But maybe that's for a reason, because spiritual, and I have issues with that word kind of too, because, like, spirits, but spiritual feels like warmth and ritual. And I will tell you that the older I get, the more rituals I've brought into my life, the better my life has become. The Shabbat ritual, which I didn't grow up with, is such a beautiful ritual. Have a meal with family and friends. On Friday night, you light candles, you make bread, you break the bread, you talk about meaningful things, and then we do a full day of rest. And actually, the Jewish holiday, which just happened again, I love the rituals. There's a ritual, you go to the ocean and you throw out breadcrumbs or bird seeds to throw out the previous year and start fresh. I think the most beautiful parts of Judaism to me are the ritual. And we are a society that does not do very many rituals. I even think there needs to be more rituals. Like, when our daughter just went off to college, which felt very abrupt because, COVID, we couldn't be there that long. But then there should be some ritual of, like, oh my gosh, a whole human is not living in my house. Like, bring in rituals. Rituals are marketing a moment and making them special. And actually, it's interesting, because when I was at that rock concert, I was thinking a lot about sports concerts, but I mean, sports games. I don't watch sports games, but I'm sure people get that feeling when they're watching a game together. I think that more rituals that bring a sense of meaning and purpose. Like, I also love rituals. Like, one of the reasons I went to temple, and again, I'm not a religious person, so I really struggle with all the mentions of God, and I'm always like translating words in my head. But the thing that I love as I'm there is I love knowing that Jews all over the world are doing the same thing that at that exact moment, and it makes me feel connected to something bigger than myself. So I think rituals that are out there, like New Year's Eve, even though it's kind of I love seeing the fireworks go off all over the world. And I love moments where we're all experiencing something together. And I don't think we have enough of them for sure in our culture. That's why I wrote my book, and I called it 24/6. I didn't call it Tech Shabbat, which is what I call our Shabbats. I tried to call it something that would relate to everyone, and remove it from a religious framework and say, this is this very ancient wisdom on a good way to live is to work 6 and take a complete real day of rest on your 7th.
Yeah, it's a great title. We think about, the overt technology like a phone, and it's like, yes, that is technology. But quite clearly, there's all sorts of older forms of technology, like this religious technology. The Shabbat itself is a form of technology. And it's sort of bringing in the full picture of the technology we have at our disposal. So it's not just like leaning on the things that have silicone in them, and chips, because that it feels like a really part of the picture you're talking about. Like, our humanity is not saying it's old and new. It's like, no, it's recognizing maybe our strongest technologies are the oldest ones. And they're embedded in some of our oldest forms, like religion, in a lot of ways.
I love that. I just got chills like 4 times when you said that. Yes, that Shabbat is a technology. I mean, it used to be that people worked every day. Every day there was no break. And Shabbat came along, and it was pretty radical at the time to say, don't work, put down your plows, don't work. And not only that, but your animals shouldn't work. People that work for you shouldn't work. It was like, I think, the first example of like equal rights. Everyone's on the same page here. No one's going to work for a day. And it is, and you're right, I'm trying to liberate some of these ancient tools that are baked into religion. And the problem is that most people, it's not a problem, because I have respect. If you're a religious person, I have respect for you, even though I'm not. Like, I love anyone that's passionate. I mean, to a point, not when they're zealot about taking away women's rights, but that's a whole other issue. But I couldn't believe, like, the more I started doing our Tech Shabbats, which really only Orthodox Jews really do. Like, you have to be pretty religious to do a full day of rest the way we do it. Like, I had somebody say to me, you're the most religious, unreligious person I've ever met. Shabbat. But I was like, why is this just for religious people? This needs to be for everyone. It's like one of the best ways to live. Like, I have all my creative ideas on my Tech Shabbat. I feel more productive. I feel more connected. It's like the secret sauce to life, and really only people that are really religious are doing it. So I wanted to liberate this ancient tool, as you call it. And, if you think about religion, so many beautiful ideas are inside of it. The problem is they're baked into this structure that actually divides people.
Yeah, they can become co-opted, and also, Judaism is an interesting example. I'm no expert, but I lived in New York for 12 years, and so I got the deep dive into the culture of my friends. And, if you go into Orthodox Judaism and even further into Hasidic Judaism, the rules get pretty intense and detailed, and then bifurcating outwards, it's like, wait a minute. But without any judgment on that, I think if you just step up to the top level, you're right that, like, there's something in there about reflection. And the Tech Shabbat is about that. But it's sort of saying, if you keep peeling back the onion, like, there's a necessary element about being human that's like the other side of the yin yang. There's the doing and the undoing, or the not doing, that's completely necessary for that engine to keep moving forward. And so it's like, maybe even beyond taking one day off, did you play around with almost like the micro moments or ways to build in those forms of reflection throughout the week?
Yeah.
Micro Shabbats, in a way?
Yeah, no, it's a great point, because I think Shabbat is being present, right? Shabbat is really being grateful and present for what's right in front of you, and going back to how all these technologies are designed to make you be in a constant state of wanting more, wanting the next news headline, wanting that next email, wanting to see that next notification on something you posted, or wanting those shoes that keep popping up, or wanting that vacation that you can't go on, or watching that want. And the minute I turn off my screens on Friday night, I go from this state of wanting to the state of appreciation of what I already have. It's so crazy. It's such a complete change of being, mode of being. And I wanted to bring that more into my life. And, our minds on their own will naturally go to a state of worry. That is how humans were designed, because to survive, like, I need to worry about this and worry about that and worry what's on the news and worry about this so I can stay alive. The problem is that, everything's feeding off that sense of worry or FOMO, or, and so one of the things I do in the morning and at night is I try to redirect. So I wake up and I do a gratitude journal. I wake up and think of 3 things I'm grateful for. I always try to make them very different things, so I'm never repeating myself, because then it makes it very interesting. You start looking for those moments, and then it asks. It's called the 5-minute journal. It's pretty awesome. And it says, what are 5 things that would make today great? So then I have to do a little thinking. What am I going to do today?
I think I've seen that. Yeah.
Oh, it's so great. It's such a simple structure. Yeah. And then then you write 3 things that would make today great. And then at the end of the day, it's like, what were 3 amazing things that happened today? And they're always different than what you thought. And it helps you kind of look for those beautiful moments and be really present for them. And then what's one thing you wish you did differently, which I think is a little bit of reflection on something that you wish you had done differently. So I do that every morning and every night. And then I also have a dog, which has been amazing. I have a dog in my life. We go on a lot of walks. And a lot of times I try to think, okay, I'm going to go on this walk and I'm not going to listen to a podcast and I'm not going to call anyone. I am just going to take a walk. And I write a whole chapter in the book about how much your mind does its magical thinking when it's just processing what's already in there. And what we're living in is a time where we could have, as my daughter calls it, surround learning. You could be learning something new on a podcast every second, which is easy. You need to give yourself time to just process what you've learned, what you've thought about. So that's why you have great ideas when you're doing the dishes or in the shower or going for a walk. So sometimes when you go for a walk, you should just go for a walk. Sometimes when you go in the shower, don't turn on the news, don't turn on a podcast, and just take a shower. And sometimes you're doing the dishes, just do the dishes. And I promise you, your best ideas will happen. Like, they happen for me at those moments and on my texture box, because there's no new input and I'm really making unusual connections with what's already in there and digesting what I've already experienced that week.
Yeah, that's very much true. I mean, it's a form of meditation too, when you're sort of just doing any one thing at a time. And that can be doing the dishes,
drinking beer. Actually, I want to ask you about your name, Krishna, because, like, what did you grow up with? Are you named that? Were you brought, tell me.
No, I was given the name by a spiritual teacher named Ram Dass, who I worked with a couple years back on a record together. And he gifted me the name, and I adopted it in my life as a form of practice, because it's actually extremely presencing, because it's a bit of a shock to me to hear it, right? And so every time I hear it by someone else, and eventually when someone adopts it, they don't think twice about this. Like, Krishna, hey, do you want to get some lunch? But I still hear it. And I'm like, oh, wow. All right. I could drop all the patterns that I've been carrying and, in a sense, like, be anew in this moment in whatever form I want to be. What does it mean? What's the best form of me in this moment? As opposed to, like, Trevor is my birth name. It's like, well, who is Trevor? I know what Trevor is. It's been 40 years of Trevor. It's like,
wow.
So it was kind of like a mantra that awakens me in a sense.
I love that. In some ways, I'm not kosher, but my mother-in-law is. And the way she describes it is it, like, makes her stop and think before she eats, because, some people just, like, rush through, eat. They're looking at their cell phone. They're not even thinking, but she has to think, like, which silverware I'm going to use. I'm not going to mix this. And it just makes her stop and pause for a minute and, like, okay, I'm about to eat. What does this mean? And, I've when I was growing, Buddhism has really spoken to me. And there's this incredible story about, your soul is like water blowing across water, how it, like, sparkle and refracts and reflects everything that's going on around it. But it's only when you still the wind on the water that you can see what's inside the water. So I think that these smaller moments that you're talking about, or Shabbat for me is like this big moment of reflection, but then these little moments in the day when I journal, where I'm trying to be present, I'm really thinking like, I'm stopping the wind on the water. And maybe that's what Krishna, when somebody says to you, Krishna, and you're like, wait, I need to stop and take a moment.
It's a micro Shabbat in a way, yeah. I'm curious if you think that these various forms of technology, especially the ones that exist on the phone and apps that are meant to cause mindfulness, if you think that's sort of a fool's errand, or if I can't really, maybe it's impossible to lump it all into one thing like that. But do you think we can use technology to bring us back to ourselves, or is it sort of like you're trying to have your cake and eat it too?
That's a great way to put it. I think it can be one of the tools, but it shouldn't be your central. Like I do the guided meditation apps, and I'm just about to try. Somebody was saying there's like a 5-minute yoga. I love doing yoga. I do it once a week, but I want to try to bring it more into my life. And so it's like there's a 5-minute yoga video. I think those little prompts are helpful, but I think at the core, it's like an assembly of something that you're trying to build the muscle in yourself. And I think that's why I love Shabbat being weekly, and we do it every week. And, there's a couple times a year where for some reason we're traveling, we can't do it. I feel so out of balance. So I think all these other things, reminding you to drink water or take a breath or whatever it is, I think they're helpful, but really what you're trying to do is bake it in more into your life, your body, your soul, the way you live. So it's something you can call upon. And I think we've been living in such uncertainty for a year and a half or 18 months, however long it's been a long time. What can you count on? You can count on rituals, and you can count on these moments, these small, beautiful moments. Those are things you can count on. I mean, during the whole pandemic, no one could cancel Shabbat. Everything else got canceled. No one canceled that. And it's the only that was consistent in my life, that whole period. In the beginning, really intense.
Yeah, when we were talking about reflection and being like the polarity to maybe, unconscious attention being consumed on technology, in a lot of ways, a lot of tech out there is just putting gas on the fire of grabbing our attention. It's sort of the opposite of the water that would put it out. That's reflection. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's just a recognition that, like you said, you lose yourself in your sense of time because that's what it's designed to do. That's literally its main attempt, is how long can we keep you on the platform? And it's like we, at the end of the day, have to recognize our own volition and power. There's nothing else that's going to step us and like subvert this process other than ourselves. And a lot of us, probably all of us at this point, it's been about 10 solid years of like going deep into the iPhone.
Totally.
We recognize its pull and its problems, and how we're all, I think, unhappy on a certain level with our relationship to it. And we all want to make certain levels of change. I would say almost all of us, but it's just an inability to know how to make any change that's meaningful or that will last.
You just said something that I love so much, is that you lose your sense of time. I mean, think about it. The gambling casinos, like, you never know what time it is, right?
And they design it that way. Yeah.
They take out the windows. You don't know what time it is. And it's like when we're on these phones, it's so that we lose our sense of time. But these Shabbat moments, whether it's a full day of Shabbat or it's meditation or it's being conscious of what you're eating, or is to not lose your sense of time, is to be present for your sense of time. And I think people have a lot of sense of shame around the screen, whether they admit it or not. If their kids are on it too much, if they're on it too much, you just feel bad. Like sometimes it feels good, and then there's this point it feels bad, and then I start to feel like dirty. Like, what did I just spend 2 hours doing?
A recognition of your own lack of control, and inside you're like, I'm not really in control.
Right. And so that's why I think this ancient technology of Shabbat is like this beautiful idea that a lot of people do, that people should try. And I really hold your hand on how to really do it, because people have forgotten that it's not that hard. I think people just have a lot of fear. Going back to what you just said, is they put all their power into the phone. They think that everything powerful is in that phone, but you don't realize you are powerful. Reclaim your own power. Your thoughts are powerful. Your intentions are powerful. But when you succumb to the phone it's like you're giving away all your power to the phone. And you're saying, I can only feel good if the phone's around. But really, when I turn it off, I have this heightened sense of returning to myself and what am I thinking? It's like groupthink. People are texting you, you're responding, you're in a constant state of reaction to the news, to the email, to the text. And when I turn it off, it's like, wait, I'm not reacting. I'm just like, what am I really feeling right now? What do I really, very different.
In some ways, like the constant response is demeaning the power of your responses and your thoughts and what you are choosing. And maybe another way to think about it is like, well, it is hard, but it's simple. You know, a recognition that like, no, these pulls are quite strong. And for a lot of us. And in some ways, that's the most human thing about us is we've been hijacked. It's like, it's very human to be this addicted because it's pulling on the heartstrings of what's most important to us.
Right.
And that's to be seen. But we're being seen by something that's one-sided, but we want it to be two-sided. And that's why when you went to the concerts or you're in person with someone, it is so nourishing, fulfilling, because it's the real thing. But we're being pushed into this digital lifestyle, which has many benefits, but it also has, in some ways, it has a cost. You know, it has a price.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, that's why I say it takes courage to go, you know what? I mean, when we started doing TextureBot, there wasn't all the research. There wasn't all this, like, it's all there now that this is not good for your brain, body, and soul. But at the time, I was just like, this doesn't feel good. Yeah. I don't like how I'm so distracted. It's very hard for me to keep my focus. And I used to be able to be very focused. And I just felt like, I mean, I was reading a book last night and the phone was near me. And every couple pages I went to the phone. And then I was, got to put it downstairs. I just can't focus with it's just a siren call. It's like we're in, the Odyssey and it's just this siren call. Time.
Yeah, I feel like a lot less reading. I mean, if there was ever a way to track how much reading has been happening over the last 10 years, there's a lot less reading.
Well, and it's interesting because we're kind of reading more than ever, but we're skim reading. And I do all of...
I mean, books.
Yeah, deep picture reading of books I do on Saturday when there's no screens. And I love it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm using my full brain to read, not like a little bit of my brain. And like as kids are in school right now and using screens, I just saw something about like kids doing homework in a distracted free environment. Sometimes they have multiple screens up, and I don't buy this thing that our brains are evolving to learn that way. It's just you're in a distracted state of mind. And I really feel like that's going to affect things.
Yeah. Well, we got to come to a close here, but maybe we could close it by, just sort of recognition that we're here as people, I think, to make choices. And this is a level of that choice. It's kind of like waking up to that we kind of are choosing either way. But we're abdicating that choice over to various apps and platforms to kind of, because the addiction kind of makes us compulsive about it. And we can harness that. And maybe that's a great way to start. And I'd like to try it more, because I'm hearing from you, taking that one day off, it reclaims a kind of power, and maybe you start to realize like how that can bleed into a lot of other areas of your life, and it strengthens another muscle of like who you are.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Yeah, you reclaim this power, and it feels really good. Yeah, like each week, like I did that, and it felt great, and I took care of myself.
Yeah.
I went against the grain too, because our society's like 24/7, be online all the time, be available, respond to everything. And it's really not a good way to live.
It's punk rock, TextureBot. Yeah.
It's
I like
punk rock to say, you know what? I'm not going to be available for a day. That's exactly right. It's like, it's saying I'm going against the status quo because I know that I will feel better. And it's different. And I've always felt like I went to a different, I never felt like I fit in. So it's kind of perfect, but it does it in this very radical way that's so replenishing. So I really, any of you, I promise you it's easier than you think. It's a whole mindset. If you go into it and think of all the things that bring me joy without a screen, write a big list, put it on the fridge, fill your day with that. And I really do walk you through, because, you have to tell your family and your friends. They're like steps to do.
Yeah, you have to give them a heads up. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can make this incredibly fun so it's your favorite day of the week.
Well, you have a lot going on in your world, from films to books to talks and many
Yeah.
other things. It's really wonderful. So what's the best way for people to interact with you or get into some more of these ideas? Because you have a lot more than just this, but 24/6 is a book you did most recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if people go to TiffanyShlain.com, and my last name is SHLAIN .com, you can, excuse me, you can see all my films and my book. Sorry, something went down my throat is the wrong way. And then I am on, Instagram and Twitter the other 6 days. So I think, but I've made a lot of films on this subject, but on a lot of other things. I mean, it's interesting. My next book is going to be all about creativity, which I'm very interested about. And
me too.
It mostly becomes, I feel so creative on the days without screens. Like, I want to go deeper on what are the environments that create the most fertile soil for creativity, and get you into that flow state. So anyways, yeah, I've just loved talking to you. I have to say, I do a lot of podcasts, but I love the way you came into so many of these ideas. And I love that story about your name. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and I'm really into creativity. I talk about it a lot on the show. I mean, we don't have time to get into it, but maybe another time. But this idea that it's like the real reason we're here, all of us, that's kind of what creation is things that you're choosing to do. Everything from thoughts to music and art are in the bigger forms, but it's like, that's like the real thing. And it's for all of us, and I think we feel dead inside when we give that over to other folks. We're like, well, I pay you now to create for me. And it's beautiful to see the real masters, absolutely. But at the same time, it's like, that's what it means to be human. And a lot of us don't feel fully alive because we're not letting that energy flow through us.
Completely. I mean, even... it's such a different...
It's another conversation, but it's really, it's a big deal. It's a big deal
to have that conversation with you, because even the word creation, which again is baked into religion, and like getting into, and even when YouTube started using the word creators, I mean, there's so many interesting...
Right. Yeah. No, it's a deep subject.
I really would love to have that with you. We'll have to...
We'll do that, and hopefully we'll get our tech situated here. But I appreciate that we could make this work, Tiffany, and it's been a pleasure to finally cross paths.
Oh, absolutely. Have a great rest of your day, and I really, really feel grateful for this conversation. So thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll follow up, and thank you again.
Okay. Bye, Krishna.
All right. Bye. Thank you so much, Tiffany. That was really fun, and thank you for your patience and commitment to make that work. We're gonna do another one. I think we're gonna do a part 2 on creativity, Tiffany and I. So I'm looking forward to that. This song that you're hearing in the background is called Clarion, and it was also just released this week. I should have mentioned that at the beginning, but it is the first single we're releasing off the new album called In, a soundtrack for the Psychedelic Practitioner Volume 2. And a little side note, if you want to just hear the whole record now before it comes out in late October, it is being featured exclusively on the Trip app. That is by Field Trip Health. And that is an app where I also did a few meditations. So if you like the guided meditations, I did 3 more new ones for them that are living exclusively on their app. But for now, on the DSPs, which is what Spotify and Apple and Tidal and Amazon Music and all these things are, we have released the Clarion song. We're going to release another one, so it's in beautiful, higher fidelity. And then the In album comes out October 22nd. So it's basically a follow-up to Music for Mushrooms. It's another album that was born out of live ceremony, improvisational, I don't want to call them concerts, but performances, I guess. And just like the Music for Mushrooms album, this will be a 2-hour album designed for guiding not just psychedelic journeys. It does that extremely well. That's its primary purpose. But it also can accompany you in your dreams, as you're living your life, as you're working, as you're making love and loving and doing all the things we do in our life. There's many off-label uses, shall we say. So check it out. And I really appreciate you guys sharing the track if you enjoy it. And let us know what you think. At East Forest, Instagram, and at East Forest Music on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all the other platforms. Okay, my friends, I'm really looking forward to those of you I will see in person in Denver on the 14th, Salt Lake on the 16th, and Austin on the 21st. But for everybody else, I look forward to when we can cross paths, whenever we do cross paths. And thanks again to all of our friends on the East Forest Council on Patreon. You guys keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit. But if you do, you know what to do. You just do it with grace.